Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Bryan. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
You know, over these last few months, the men in our communities, like the Facebook group and the masterminds, have been expressing a rising desire for us to cover a topic that we have yet to broach in this podcast's history. And it's the topic around body image and body shame, including the whole weight loss/weight gain journey and how that may have an impact on how you feel about your body. Now, one of the interesting things I've seen is that every time a man requests to join the Facebook group, we always ask him the one question of, what's the single most important area of inner work that you are focused on right now? And more men are starting to express that they're on this journey of learning to love their bodies. And a lot of the men have expressed that over the course of time, they've gained weight, they've lost weight, they've gained it back again, and it's had an impact on their self-esteem, their body image, how they feel being around others. And so this episode today is for you if you've ever felt uncomfortable taking off your shirt in front of others, if you've gone through countless cycles of gaining and losing weight, if you've hit your ideal weight and yet know that it's only a matter of time before you self-sabotage, if you've ever thrown food away just so you wouldn't eat it and then found yourself picking through the trash to eat it later, or if on some level how you feel you look or how you feel about how you look makes you feel somewhat unlovable, then this episode is for you. And our guide for today's discussion is a man that Bryan and I both love. He's near and dear to our hearts, one of the men in our men's group, Mordechai Weiner. Mordechai has his own journey, 25-year-long journey of learning to love his body. He's now a coach for people learning to love their bodies and how to lose weight sustainably. He's the founder of the Reclaim Your Body Summit, where he interviewed 30 of the most world-renowned guests, such as James Clear on habits, Gay Hendricks on performance, Dr. Mark Heyman, which is about nutrition. He's also the host of the Feeling Full podcast, which focuses on weight loss, body image, and self-love. And now in this episode, Mordechai will share with you how he went from 350 pounds at his heaviest to 215 pounds today, and how he's been able to maintain that sustainably. He'll also share about how a lifetime of losing and gaining weight finally shifted into something more permanent when he stopped focusing on weight loss and instead started focusing on shame loss. We got into a really powerful discussion about how even when you hit your ideal weight, that feeling can be so fragile if on a deeper level, you really identify yourself with being the fat guy, and how to change the identity so that effect of hitting your ideal weight or however you want to feel can be more permanent. One of my favorite parts of the conversation with Morty was about how some of his experiences with food addiction and some of his patterns and his compulsions and behaviors were similar to mine when I was acting out, sexually speaking, and how some of those overlaps are quite similar. And then finally, we close with Morty getting into his decision last year to get surgery after having lost over 100 pounds, and his body had excess skin as a result of losing all that weight, and the powerful journey of self-love that he went through in being very public and sharing openly about the surgery that he had. And Bryan and I had the benefit of witnessing that up close and personal, his journey, because he shared that with our entire men's group. And that was really a gift for all of us. And then finally, I will invite you to stick around to the very end where we have 5 minutes of bonus material where Mordechai will share with you a strategy to implement when you're feeling the overwhelming urge to indulge or to binge. And this one's powerful not only for indulging or binging in food, but also indulging or binging in porn. And I can attest to it. Enjoy today's conversation on body shame, weight loss, and self-love with our friend, Mordechai. Bri, kind of hard to believe that you and I have been in the same men's group for 3 years now, right? 9 guys, 3 years, every Monday night, 2 hours. We're working on emotional fluency, right? Feeling the emotion, naming the emotion, sitting with the emotion, expressing the emotion, shifting the emotion.
It's very emotional.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions. And can you believe that this is the first time we've brought another member from our men's group onto the Great Man Within podcast?
There's an entire talent pool we are just not diving into, but today, first time, here we go.
Mordechai, welcome, man. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm flattered that I am the first man from men's group on the Great Man Within.
That's really hard to believe because we have so many talented guys who are up to big things, who are doing men's work. So yeah, Bryan, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, we've got to tap that talent pool a little bit more deeply. But man, Morty, just to introduce yourself to our audience, who are you? You run the Feeling Full podcast. You're a coach for individuals. Like, just give us a quick overview, man, of what you're doing in this world.
Yeah. So, well, hey, it's great to be here with you guys. This is fun. I've been really looking forward to this convo. Just to give a little background, I am host of the Feeling Full podcast, which is all about weight loss, body image, and self-love. I started the podcast a few months ago because of this deep desire I've had to share what I believe is, the truth about weight loss and self-love and body image. I've struggled with my weight forever. And there was one person who completely changed my life. I read this guy's book. His name is John Gabriel. He wrote a book called The Gabriel Method. This is about going back probably close to 10 years ago. And I was like, wow, a guy who lost 220 pounds, who's like, sharing truth. He wasn't trying to sell you anything. He was sharing his story. He was a Wall Street banker and he lost all this weight. And for the first time in my life, I felt like, wow, I felt there was hope because I felt like someone was genuinely sharing their truth. It completely changed my life because that set me on the journey of not dieting anymore and really, for the first time, feeling like there was hope, there was light at the end of the tunnel.
Morty, that moment right there where you picked up Gabriel's book, like what caused you to pick up the book at that moment?
Great question. I was actually in the struggle, right? Going on diets, having success and failing. And I was talking to a friend and she recommended this book. She's like, I think you're really going to like this book. Check it out. I found this guy on the internet. He seems really cool. Check it out. He has all these visualizations and nighttime visualizations and mantras and all these quacky ideas that just seem so out there and a little woo-woo-y. But I was like, hey, I'll try anything. I was desperate.
Yeah, man. So take us back in time, right? And start where things started to get out of control regarding weight and body image and maybe some shame. And I know that Bryan and I have heard some of those stories, but take our listeners back in time to when this thing really started to become a big challenge for you in your life.
It's always been a challenge. It's funny. I was funny. I was born at around 11 pounds.
That's a big baby.
Big baby.
11 pounds.
My mom loves to share how all the nurses came running in to check me out because that was the biggest baby that a lot of them have ever seen.
Wow. I don't know generally like what's a small baby and what's a big baby. I know that I was 8 pounds, 7 ounces because my mom tells me that, which I think is also kind of a big baby, but 11 pounds.
Wasn't Shaquille O'Neal like a 12-pound baby? I mean, you're playing in you're playing in some rarefied air there, buddy.
I think it's like maybe 10.7 or something around 11. I just get rounded off to the highest number. But, I was a big baby. I put it this way. I had an older brother who was a year old and I got his 2 months hand-me-downs right away. So we weren't wasting any time. I came out the gate ready to eat. Food had always been like something that I turned to. My mom, she loves to cook amazing food. I love to eat. And we used to, as a kid, I would always find myself baking a cake. My mom was a baker and one of the many things she did. I learned from her. We're very similar in a lot of ways. We used to make cakes together, cookies together. And it was a kind of like this ritual. From a very young age, I was always a big kid. So I always felt a little different than everybody else. And as I continued to get a little older, it became more of a problem. I think I became aware of it more when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, getting picked on and bullied and made fun of and like, oh, fatso, this or that. That's when I really realized there was something different about me. And I would come home wanting to go on diets. And my mom also trying to lose weight herself. We would go to Weight Watchers together and we go to meetings. I remember sitting around, these rooms full of adults at a Weight Watchers meeting, only being 11 years old and, the only kid in the room and, who lost 3 pounds, who lost 4 pounds, and everyone's kind of raising their hand, getting stickers, getting weighed in. The whole thing just never quite felt right.
At the age of 10 or 11, first of all, I know those meetings aren't geared for 10 or 11-year-olds.
No.
But two, I mean, I think about the journeys I've been on in my life and like, what journey did I start at the age of 10 that I'm still on? Like, you've been on this journey for a really, really long time.
Yeah, I'm 35 now. So we're talking at least 25 years. Wow. Way to put it in perspective, Bryan. Yeah, so I've been going on these diets and constantly, losing and gaining weight, whether it was the Atkins Diet, South Beach. I was an aggressive dieter, and I kept finding myself every time I'd go off a diet. I would go on a diet, you lose a bunch of weight, you feel good. Everyone's encouraging you. You look great. Wow, what are you doing? What are you doing? You look great. And you feel on top of the world, and you buy a bunch of new clothing, and you feel like you can, I felt like I can actually feel good about myself. And then slowly but surely, the weight would just come back on. The weight would come back on and more. It was a constant struggle for many years. I remember, when I was 16, my parents sent me to boarding school in Buffalo, New York. I literally went to school. My mom was a very big supporter of me having what I want and trying to help me. I went on the Atkins Diet, and the Atkins Diet is basically like all meat. You pretty much eat meat and chicken, not even a lot of chicken, but mostly meat. And basically don't eat more than like 20 carbs or 15 carbs. And I took the Amtrak train to Buffalo, New York with my brother and cousin. And I had one duffel bag full of clothing for, my school year, and then another duffel bag full of frozen meat. And I remember boarding the Amtrak train, wheeling this like huge thing of like steaks and salami, and I had a George Foreman. I literally got into the school and
the George Foreman. Yeah.
Yeah. And like all the kids were like, what's wrong with this guy? And then within a month, half the school was on the Atkins Diet because everyone just loved the fact that I was eating steaks for breakfast. It was, like 30 boys in the school. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my MO for many years. And then in my early 20s, fast forward a bit, many diets later, lots of weight lost and weight gained, I was really struggling because my life got really busy really quick. After college, I started a company, and it started growing a lot quicker than I imagined. I was dealing with a lot of pressure and stress and all these new emotions, and I would just eat all my feelings. I didn't know what I was feeling. It was exciting, and I would eat. It was working till 1 a.m, and I would eat. It was like no time for anything, and I would just eat. Anxious about a deal that I was working on, and I would be ordering fried chicken at 11 o'clock at night to my office. And I remember just feeling I was getting so big. I mean, I got to 330 pounds, and I didn't even know what was happening in my life. I was just eating. This is my early 20s. I'm eating a lot, smoking lots of weed, and not getting a lot of sleep and not taking care of myself at all. And I remember feeling like a complete failure.
Yeah. And Morty, so I don't know if you call it the low point or the high point of your weight. So over 300 pounds, right? And healthy weight for you, as you would say, just to give some context, would be?
I'd say 215, big guy, broad guy, 215, probably what I weigh now.
Yep. So over like 100 pounds of difference was like where you were at, like your, I guess, worst point is what you would say?
I actually probably weigh closer to 350 at my heaviest. I just stopped weighing myself at one point. But yeah, to your point, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And, what's really interesting is because, with my addiction and my past addiction with sexuality, they say the two toughest addictions are eating, food addictions, and sex addictions, because unlike alcohol, unlike drugs, you can't just abstain from them, right? Like you have to eat. And assuming you want to have a relationship or intimate experiences in your life, like you can't just give up sex forever. One of the key differences, though, as I hear you talking about this, Morty, is like a sex addiction you can hide. Food addiction, it shows up on your body, right? It's very visible. Can you talk about what that's like when those visible signs, like when the weight gain starts to happen and the praise that you were once getting about losing the weight is now manifesting maybe in other ways? Like what did you notice, not just from your inside, but how people reacted to you as like weight went on?
That's a great question. Taking me back to that mindset where, you see, even when I lost weight, I never felt like I had it. I was like, if you only knew how fragile I was, or if you only knew what I was really doing to be in this body. You're saying I look great, but I know I'm about to like fall off the deep end. Like it was so fragile. And I think people didn't realize that. Even when I lost weight, physically, I may have been in shape. I may have been, size large or an extra large for the first time, but emotionally, I still felt like I wasn't happy with my body. I felt deep shame around the way I would look when I take my shirt off and look in the mirror, seeing, my skin hanging off my body. I would feel like, oh, come on, you lost 100 pounds, but I mean, you still, and the craziest thing is, it takes longer for your brain to catch up to your body. So even if I lost 100 pounds, it takes a long time for your brain to catch up. One of the things I learned from John Gabriel was, visualizing the future body. And having your brain do the work as well as losing weight was so important, and something I never paid attention to until that point where he has this idea of like, visualize your future body. And I went ahead and like, I found a guy on the internet that was like in great shape, 5'10", broad guy. And I cropped my head. I got someone that's like 5 or upward, and he cropped my head on this guy's body. And every day I would look at this photo for years, and I would just visualize myself being in this body. Because even when I had lost weight, I realized I still didn't appreciate or love myself or feel the way people were perceiving me.
I always thought that imposter syndrome was related to accomplishments or something kind of external. But I always thought imposter syndrome went away when there was physical proof of success or of your body. And it sounds like, Morty, that you were like, you had the proof. You had lost 100 pounds, but you still felt like an imposter in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I still felt like the fat guy. I still felt like the fat guy even after losing the weight. This is where the whole idea of like, surgery came up, where I think this was my early 20s when I finally lost like my initial 100 pounds. And I remember standing in front of the mirror in my Brooklyn apartment and seeing the skin. And this is like my second mirror moment. Like there was a first mirror moment when I was at my heaviest, where I realized that like, man, you just got to do this, because what I realized when I was at my heaviest was, what is your motive for actually losing weight? And I realized my motive for losing weight all my life was so I can feel accepted and appreciated and loved by other people. And what I realized was when I was like 24, 25, I'm like, you're always trying to do this for other people to love you, for other people to accept you. Why don't you just take your time and do it because you deserve it, because you deserve to feel happy with yourself? That was the first like, oh shit, I never thought of that before. That was that like first wake up call. And the second wake up call was a few years later, after I had lost all this weight. I'm standing in the mirror and I'm like, man, what the fuck? You lost all the weight. You did all this work. You've been going to the gym, working out and doing all these things. And now you have like these skin bags hanging off your chest and your stomach is hanging over. I'm like, this is not what you signed up for. I've had a dream of having a 6-pack probably since I was 6. It's not what I thought 100 pounds would look like. And at that point, I decided, you know what, I'm going to have surgery. I'm trying to think how old I was. I was probably like 28, 29. And I started interviewing surgeons in Manhattan. And I go from surgeon to surgeon to surgeon to surgeon to surgeon, learning about, well, they're going to cut me open and do all this and cut the skin off and all this stuff. And I was like, something was off. I was like, I can't do it. This is a problem. I'm basically saying to myself, like, you are not lovable, so you have to go get surgery now to love yourself.
Where did that story come from?
That's a great question, Dom. As a kid, I just thought I was less than because of my body, because I got made fun of and picked on. And the story I told myself was, I'm not a desirable human. My friends, thought I was less desirable because I was fat. Which I told myself the story that same thing with women. I'm less desirable because I have a big body and my body's out of shape. It's a story I've always told myself. So in my early 20s, this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, you'll get what you want once you are desirable and once you have a body that you feel is worthy. And I thought surgery would give me that. So I went to go interview all these surgeons and decided, I'm going to pay whatever it costs to get that, because this is what I really want.
Did you have to grapple with any potential latent shame around the idea of getting surgery?
At that point, yeah. Let me just paint you this picture. So at this point in my life, I'm exiting my company and I have no idea what I want to do next. And I'm going to go travel because I have no idea what I want to do. So at this point, I decided that like in 3 or 4 months, I'm putting everything I own in storage, buying a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. This is in 2015. I'm like, but you're going to go travel the world? I mean, you could be having so much fun on the road, man, if you were just in good shape. Like, you don't want to go travel the world with all this extra skin after you lost all this weight. This is not what you wanted. My story was like, go have surgery. That way you could be running around the beach without like the skin, and you would feel great and you would feel desirable and you would be having all the fun with women. And the fun thermometer in my life was going on. The radar in my life was, you can have so much more fun if you get into this body. So I'm like, you just have surgery, you go to Costa Rica, you'll be fine a few months later and you'll just have a great time.
Which is what you're doing now. You're in Costa Rica. You've had the surgery. You're running down the street with your shirt off, flexing, and you're having a pretty damn good time from what we've seen.
Right. And
so Morty, what is the problem with that? I hear you saying like, I'm going to go travel the world. I just exited my company. I want to look good. What? I don't see an issue with it.
So I ended up deciding not to have the surgery. And I still go to Costa Rica. I buy a one-way ticket to Costa Rica.
When was this?
This is in 2015.
Okay.
This is my second time doing this.
Yep.
It's so funny. They're parallel universes. It's kind of crazy now that we're having this conversation. I haven't thought about it in this detail. But everything in storage. I go to Costa Rica. I land in the same town I'm in right now, actually, in Santa Teresa. And I'm just living. And then I find out about this retreat called Passage, which is an entrepreneurial retreat with 40 people in the jungle in Costa Rica, a few $1,000. And after like traveling alone for like a month, I was like, this is going to be great. I want to be around other people. It would be great to meet some people on the road. So I signed up to the retreat. I had really no idea what I was in for. I just knew entrepreneurs, retreat, jungle, women, fun. It just all started making sense to me. And I'm like, I'm in Costa Rica anyways, right? This is great. So I go to the retreat and it's mostly women. It's probably like 25 women and like maybe 10 guys. And we're camping out like in the middle of the jungle and there's all this programming and they're bringing all these great speakers and it's a 3-week event. And one of the first things on the retreat that one of the workshops was by this woman, Heather, and her husband, Jillian. And the idea of the workshop was to figure out what your life's purpose is. And everyone gets a chance to get in front of everybody, all 40 participants, and tell their story in 10 minutes after like a few days of doing all this work, like, tracking all your high moments and your low moments. And I got up on stage. Actually, before I got up on stage, I was talking to Heather and I was telling Heather that I felt like I don't know how to be on this retreat because I can't take my shirt off. There's a pool here. There's all these women. I'm like, what do I do? And she's like, listen, tomorrow, why don't you just take your shirt off by the pool for like a minute and see what happens and then put it right back on, but just take it off for a minute. And I was like, nah, I can't take this shirt. I'm like, if anybody sees me, they're going to see the skin. I'm not going to feel good. And she's like, just try it. Anyways, I'm like, I'll try it. So I tried it. I was like, whoa, like literally my heart sank. I did it. It was a big deal. And I put my shirt back on and everything was fine. A day or two later, I was giving my talk and I get up there and I say, hey guys, my life story is kind of like, I kind of give them some of the stuff that we shared, but the highlights were like, money has always been a really important part of my life. Growing up, without a lot of money, my family didn't have lots of money. And so as a kid, I always wanted to make money. That was always really important to me. I started this company and it was successful and I had over 100 employees and it was great and the team was great and we achieved some amazing things together. And I always wanted to lose weight and be in shape. Like that was another goal of mine. And I lost over 100 pounds. I'm so unhappy and I'm so miserable. I feel like a failure. I achieved 2 of the biggest things I wanted and I'm 30 years old and I feel like a failure. I'm telling the whole story. And then after the talk in front of 40 people, I just ripped my shirt off. And I felt like a fucking $1 million. And I'm standing there sharing this with everybody. And everyone just stood up and just gave me a standing ovation, clapping and going on and on and on and on. And I was like, whoa. And that was a really big turning point for me because that was the first few days of the retreat.
But what did that moment do for you? Like what was that turning point about?
It was really about realizing that, wow, I'm lovable just the way I am. I'm lovable just the way I am and nothing to do with my success as a businessman and nothing to do with my body. And everyone gets to share at the end of that. And people shared some amazing things.
Yeah. What you're saying here is there was a massive identity shift.
Yes.
And I know that you've had James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, on one of your summits, the Reclaim Your Body Summit. Yeah. And James Clear always talks about it. And this is like the number one insight I took away from Atomic Habits. The reason why our efforts to change our habits fail is because we try to change the wrong thing. We try to change our behaviors versus trying to change our identity. And this goes back to, you said, every time I lost weight, it was so fragile because I always felt like the fat guy inside the body that maybe had just lost 50 or 75 pounds, but I knew inevitably, I was going to balloon back up because the identity was, I'm either the overweight guy, fat guy, whatever your terminology was. And I've heard a couple of other guys in our mastermind talk about this too. There's that thrilling journey of ballooning up to the, your heaviest weight and then saying, I know what it takes to go down. And there's that 4 or 5 month journey. There's a focus, there's a tenacity, there's intensity. But then when you get to that place where it's now the plateau, at least for this, some of these men, it was kind of not as exciting anymore. And they didn't identify with being that way. What they identified with was being heavier. And so what it sounded like for you was one of your key turning points was, I am lovable. No matter what I look like on the surface, I am lovable. talk about like how that identity shift, like what was the domino effect, I suppose you could say, of that identity shift for you in the years that followed?
Yeah, I mean, great points. I think like the identity shift is such a big piece. And I think a lot of people, right, we hit that place where we lose the weight and then we start backpedaling because we don't identify with somebody who's in shape. And our behaviors start to change. And that's the thing, it's actually two tracks, right? There's losing weight and then there's maintaining weight. And they're two completely separate things. And I think to your point, having a strong identity is actually really important to the maintenance of weight loss. But, all the fears I had on the retreat were I was completely wrong. I had plenty of fun. There was great intimacy. It was just like all the things that I thought were all the stories I told myself. I was blown away by how wrong I was. I'm like, whoa, if I'm wrong about this and I'm like perceiving, especially women, I'm perceiving women in a certain way that I'm not desirable with this skin. And I was wrong in such a clear, abundant way. I'm like, okay, I need to check myself here. And that kind of took me into this new space of like, okay, so I am okay without my shirt off. And now I just need to get the reps in. Taking my shirt off was a really big deal. I mean, it's hard to describe because you guys are both in great shape. I don't know if you guys have struggled with your body image, but it's like, I would never take my shirt off as a kid. I mean, my parents had made one photo without my shirt on as a kid, so every time I go to a swimming pool in camp, like the thousands of times and stories out, I would hide. And the story on the retreat was I was going to blend in and nobody would even notice I didn't take my shirt off. That was the story I would tell. I'll go on the hammock and everyone's in the pool or the beach. I just won't go in.
It sounds like a lot of hiding, which takes up, I imagine, a ton of energy.
Exactly.
And so I'm not surprised that when you finally got the shirt off and the story changed, all of a sudden, boom, there's a burst of energy.
Freedom. Exactly. I felt liberated. I felt free. I'm like, wow, I can really be myself. I don't have to hide anymore. And that felt so energetically like a healing, like that was like a layer of healing that I didn't ever experience before.
So Morty, I know we're not at your present day quite yet. We're still talking a few years back, but I'm curious. I'm dying to ask this question. Where do you start with people now? So it sounds like there's two different things going on. There's the body, you lost 100 pounds, but there's also this identity, freedom, like piece that really it sounds like congeals. Yeah. So where do you start with people?
So there's two parts that I think anybody can start with and get results right now today, which are two really easy steps, which is two things I like to teach is one, if you carry body image, like one thing I wish, what Heather did for me was she was like, just do it a little bit. So when I was coaching this woman a couple years ago and she used to have a lot of body image and she lost 50 pounds and she would say, I never wear a bathing suit. And I'm not going to the beach. I'm not going to a pool. Are you crazy? I'm not doing that. And I was like, listen, here's your homework this week. I want you to go to a pool at least 45 minutes from your town. And I want you to go swimming in a bathing suit and see how you feel afterwards. Send me a video how you feel afterwards. Man, her entire, just the way the freedom I felt from her without even her knowing what happened, just 30 minutes it changed everything because now she felt free. It had
nothing to do with her body. It was just the act
It's all mental. It's all the act of actually being witnessed by other people and coming out the other side and feeling okay. So I was talking to another guy who lost a lot of weight and I told him, I'm like, man, he lives in Brooklyn. I'm like, just go to Prospect Park. He lives in Crown Heights. I was like, just go to Prospect Park at night. No one can see you. Take your shirt off. And if you want to put some music on in your ears, even dance a little bit, but just take your shirt off.
Dance a little bit. You're really compounding things here.
I know that's a little dance. It depends on what you're feeling, but in the dark, there's nobody around. Well, it's Brooklyn. Maybe you shouldn't be dancing without your shirt on in the park.
Plenty of people do, I imagine.
Yeah.
Morty, what it sounds like you're talking about though is like, it's that people who are struggling with weight and body image are not necessarily after like the weight or an ideal weight. They're after the freedom that brings, right?
Yeah, it's not feeling like a captive to it all, And I think that's what we spoke about earlier, which is like the idea of feeling controlled. I mean, I'm sure in your life with the addiction, but like feeling like you're feeling controlled by something, it takes away any sense of freedom.
Yeah. So for example, like in our men's group, I remember like you had joined maybe a year or year and a half after we had formed, and you come into a group where pretty much every guy is lean, who's in shape. And, we had some conversations where you were just like, you guys don't get it. You guys don't understand what it's like to be in this body. And so like, what did that feel like for you, when you were in our group? I mean, did that feel free to be yourself? And
well, at first, honestly, I was very intimidated to join just because, it's a killer group of guys who are all respect. And yeah, I remember that meeting where I was like, you guys just don't understand what it's like to be me because everyone in the group is in great shape. And I'm like, I felt far from it. And like, not only the physical shape, I think like the idea of feeling controlled by the compulsions that I deal with, I felt like anybody would understand, like, you know, what it's like to be in the kitchen, you know, and like anybody who's struggling with the weight, I'm sure has similar experience where like you throw something in the garbage that you don't want to be eating. And then 10 minutes pass by and you find yourself pulling it out of the garbage, eating from the garbage because you didn't want that. Yeah, like that compulsion, and that's the opposite of what we're talking about, the control. It's like the opposite of the control. And I hated pulling food out of the garbage so much that I would actually, if I was throwing something out back in my diet days, I would soak it in water. I'd be like, I can't even throw this in the garbage. I can't even trust myself. I'm going to actually soak it in water first, then dump it in the garbage, because that way I know I'm not going to go that far, you know?
Did you ever go that far? Did you ever pull the Oreos out that were wet?
Thankfully not.
Okay.
Thankfully not.
Morty, this is so relatable for me, like, you know, because obviously the sex addiction years, it was almost like my version of that would be, there would be someone who would be unhealthy, kind of like a toxic sexual relationship with a woman. And like, I would delete her number, like kind of wipe her off the face of the earth, only to kind of track down an old email and then like reestablish contact. And it's like I guess my version of pulling something out of the trash and then doing it all over again. And so that feeling of freedom is so important, man, because there's no shortage of ways to lose weight, you know, whether it's Weight Watchers or the Atkins diet or the countless diets that are out there. And I imagine the people who come to you, right, for coaching, for guidance on this, have had a history of years, maybe even decades of their lives where they've successfully lost weight, but unsuccessfully re-identified with something or created a new identity as, I am a person who loves themselves. I am a person who can maintain this weight. And so why is that so challenging? And why does the industry focus on weight loss versus identity shifts?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think you're 100% right. I mean, we focus on weight loss because everyone needs to lose weight, or not everybody needs to lose weight. So a lot of people need to lose weight. And today's society, actually, it's more common for people to struggle with their weight than it is to not. So, and by definition, diets don't actually work. Like diets will work, like you said, they'll help you lose weight, but they don't help you keep the weight off, because what you're doing on a diet usually is something that you can't do long term. Like you go on the Atkins for 6 months and you could lose 100 pounds, but you're going to get like all types of acid reflux and your body's going to respond in ways that you aren't healthy. You can't just, it's not healthy to eat that amount of meat and for your body for the rest of your life. I mean, you can't do that. So when someone starts integrating some new carbs or less meat, all of a sudden they start gaining the weight back. So, diets are, by definition, a Band-Aid solution to a gushing wound. And because so many people are trying to lose weight, the diet industry is booming. We live in a society where, food-like products are so easily accessible. I mean, go to any gas station and you can't find anything with alive. I mean, they usually have that little fridge, 7-Eleven has that little thing in the middle with like cut up apples or bananas, but like all the shelves are lined with every type of potato chip and candy and taffy and chocolate bar. So the accessibility of unhealthy food is so available, and like the accessibility of healthy food is more rare. I mean, I'm in Costa Rica now, and like it's hard to get unhealthy food here. Everyone's in great shape. If you want unhealthy food, you got to figure out how to get it. Like you got to find the ingredients maybe to make it. And I think it's an American thing, the way we live our lives, where we want everything fast. We want the food fast, so it's usually not healthy, and we want to lose the weight fast because we want to get to the goal. And really, the goal isn't actually losing the weight. Really, the goal is actually being okay with the way you are, whether you think you're overweight or not. If you have 20 pounds, 50 pounds, or 100 pounds to lose, just being okay with the way you are and truly accepting that as your reality. And as soon as I think we do that, as soon as we actually accept ourselves for who we are, that's when everything starts to change. And that's when weight loss actually starts to stick.
So Morty, I want to talk on that point with your story, because you told us about this journey you were on in Costa Rica. You take off your shirt, you feel freedom. At that point, you hadn't had the surgery.
Right.
But now you have had the surgery. Like I would have thought it was the opposite way around, right? Like you do the surgery and you feel better. But what you're saying, and you say you do this to clients also, is you like change the identity first, or you change the thoughts around your body, and then you do the things to your body. So I guess that's the question. So you changed your identity and then you did the surgery. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, for me, it was really important to not cop out. It felt like when I was going to do the surgery when I was 30, 5 years ago, it was a cop out. It was like, okay, you hate yourself. You hate the way you look. Do the surgery, you'll fit in, and you won't tell anybody. Nobody will know. It'll be your good secret that you got the surgery, and you're going to be traveling for a long time anyways now, so nobody will even know. You're going to meet all these new people, and you'll be comfortable.
Got it.
And you'll get everything you want. That was the story I told myself. After going through taking the shirt off, that started a whole journey of taking the shirt off and starting to love myself. And that went on for years. I mean, after taking the shirt off on the retreat, I know a few months later, I ended up at an Envision festival, like Burning Man in the jungle in Costa Rica with like 5,000 or 10,000 people. And taking my shirt off at that festival, it was like 100 degrees outside and I'm walking around without my shirt on. And it was hard to do it. Like every time I was taking my shirt off, it was like peeling a layer of my body. It was like, I remember the feeling of the shirt leaving my skin at this Envision Fest. I literally peeled it off because it was so hot. And I'm like, you know what? F this. And I just like threw the shirt and I was like, I'm walking around without it. It was like a big deal. And I walked around without it. And I remember feeling like people were like, hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. I thought people were going to judge me because like, who's this guy walking around with? Also, it's a much bigger deal in my head. It's not like I had like these bags and sacks of skin, it's in my head. It's like, but I remember like feeling the energy from people like, we're like, yeah, man, good for you. Hell yeah, go for it. Yeah. That reinforcement really helped me to start loving myself. And then after my year-long travel, I moved to Venice Beach and I started this thing called, I wanted to continue taking my shirt off, right? After traveling, I'm like, I need to continue to do this. So I started a thing called Shirtless Therapy. I would get on my bike on the boardwalk of Venice Beach and I would take my shirt off. And I would tie it to the bike and I'd just bike up and down and then I'd just high five random strangers. I'm like, boom, boom, boom. Like, yeah, good morning. It's like, I'm an early riser, so I'm like shouting at people. I'm like, good morning. And people aren't around. I'm just having a ball. And I recorded myself. And then I meet other fat guys who lost weight who also dealt with the same thing. I'm like, yo, you got to join me. We're doing the Shirtless Therapy. And men would join me on the beach and we would bike up and down the boardwalk. And guys were like in great shape. They didn't have the skin. Not everyone deals with the skin stuff. And this other guy who lost 100 plus pounds and he was doing it with me, he felt like he had the same shame and he was in great shape. I'm like, man, I wish. And he would join and we would do it together. This all helped my self-concept of like, wow, so I'm not ashamed anymore. I feel like, and every time I took my shirt off, it was getting easier and easier and easier to a point where I felt, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I lost the weight. And yeah, you know what? I take my shirt off and you know what? I have extra skin. You don't like it? Don't look, like everything started changing.
Dude, I mean, it sounds like the real journey is to go from shame to self-love, right? I mean, that's the journey is shame to self-love, which then gives freedom. And you talked about like how 6 years ago, getting the surgery would have been a cop-out. It would have kind of been like bypassing the steps that you needed to take to reduce the shame. And instead, you went and did the work, right? Like you took the shirt off, you did the shirtless therapy, you enrolled other people, you shared your story. And what was amazing this last year, when you finally decided to do the surgery, it was like the next right action because you were so public about it. Like you chronicled and documented every part instead of keeping it a secret. Like you said, like 6 years ago would have been, you could do it on the road and you can hide. No one will know because they're only meeting the new you. This time you put it all on display for all of us in the men's group. And we had like this beautiful opportunity to witness this transformation. And so what was that experience like for you, being able to be so proud versus hiding that part of your experience?
It's so great to have this conversation with you both because you saw such a personal part of my journey, like that tail end of like this last year, like this accumulation of like it all. And, I think that it felt like an act of self-love. Like doing this surgery now a year ago, or maybe it's a year and a few months now, it felt like an act of like, yeah, man, we're going to do this surgery. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, you're going to hide and you're going to go away and no one's going to know and you're not telling anybody about this. It'll be your secret. Now it's like, no, it wasn't like I was, tweeting about my experience, but I was sharing it with my closest friends and family. And I was, the 30 or 40 people, maybe, 50 who knew about it, who I've told, it wasn't trying to, but it was just like, it was my life. I was by a Shabbat dinner, probably like 3 months before the surgery or 2 months before the surgery. And someone asked a question by the dinner and they were like, what's something or another? And my prompt was like something that you're stretching yourself or doing something. I'm like, the whole time I'm thinking like, oh man, like I can really share that about my process here. I've been interviewing all these doctors. I mean, you guys do because you were in the, from men's group. I was sharing all my experiences with all these different doctors. And and some of them were just like gnarly, right? And I remember by this dinner party, there was probably like 15 or 20 of us. And I was like, yeah, I've been interviewing these doctors and this surgery I'm doing. And, and it was like really felt really awkward to share this by a dinner. And then I just got so much support. It was just like, it fed into this act of self-love. And people talk about how daunting the surgery is because it could be really bad and really painful. And it's so psychological. Like I had so much support and love going into it for myself and the people that I'm closest with that it just felt like, I mean, it's weird to say this, but I had a great time. Like, the drugs were helpful for the pain, I feel like a great, well-deserved experience.
It sounds like if you would have done this in 2015, it would have been lonely with the hope that you would feel better.
Yes.
And in this one, it feels like it was a connecting experience. I was at that pre-surgery, pre-Morty going away to do surgery party, and it was so connective. And I think I took something away from that, just thinking about the process that you went through to make the decision on what surgery or the surgeon to do it. And it was such a connective moment for everybody there. And it's so beautiful to see like how you can do the exact same thing in a completely different way for a completely different outcome.
Yeah.
I want to hit you with a couple of quick hit questions because, for men like Bryan and I, who have been fortunate enough to go through most of our lives without like really having to look too closely at, body image and these kinds of things, and have friends though, like you and other men where this is a struggle. And I understand what my own version of that is, where, like my sexuality and my behaviors like require an extra level of vigilance that other people don't understand, Yeah. And and there's certain things I would know that I would want to communicate with my friends around, hey, here's how my life is like, and here's what I would need from you in terms of support. What would you, say to men who haven't had to struggle with body image, but have friends who do, or who have teammates who do, or who have colleagues who do? How can we create safe spaces, welcoming spaces for those who like this is a reality for?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Dom. I love how thoughtful you are about this. It's my belief that, and I'm not sure that everybody would appreciate this, but I wish my fit friends would open that dialogue with me. When I was at my heaviest, I had friends that were in great shape. I wish they could take the time to understand what I was going through, to ask, hey, is it okay if we have a conversation? You keep bringing up your weight. Or is it okay if we actually do you want to dive into this a bit more? So, I wanted that conversation. And instead, I think people walk around eggshells because, you're losing and gaining weight. It's like the biggest thing about weight loss and like failing is like it's a public breach of integrity. I tell you I'm going on a diet. I tell you I figured it out. You see me at the gym. You see me lose 50 pounds. You see me lose 75 pounds. And then you're like, yeah, man, you did it. And I'm like, yeah. And then a month later, you see me, I put back 20. And then you see me like 6 months later, Christmas or, Hanukkah or any other holiday party or something or company event. And you're like, oh, ooh, yeah, we're not going to talk about that because he said he wasn't going to do this again and he did it. So how do you have the conversation with someone without making them feel bad or wrong for it? And I think you can't just walk over to someone and say, hey, let's have a conversation about your weight. But there's a way to do it in a compassionate way, which is like, hey, I just want to put it out there. If you ever want to talk about this topic, I'm like really open to like holding space or being there for you, whatever language, you would use. But letting somebody know that you're really there for them, kind of like, what you do. It's like you do this in your life. Like you hold space for other men. They know they can rely on you. It's the same thing with somebody with their weight. It's like just holding that space.
Morty, I like this example of just holding the space, because when I think about that scenario that you just ran us through, the idea of going to a friend and be like, I noticed you put on probably another 20 pounds. Like it sounds like a really like harsh thing to do. But what you're suggesting is the offer to just be there and to chat about it. That seems palatable to me, to do something like that. Whereas like just bringing it up seems really harsh, even with maybe really close friends.
I think what I'm hearing, Morty, is like, you don't want your fit friend to like bring it up and be like, now I got some advice and some tips for you. Like, I think the word that you said was, I want to understand, what's your life experience? Like, what's this like for you? And I'm just here to listen.
Right, because the person who's dealing with their weight like this, they already feel bad. And I wouldn't say everyone feels bad about their weight, but likely a lot of people who are dealing with their weight who actually have lost and gained it back and know that because you can't not see they already feel bad. No one wants to highlight that part of their life where they A, feel out of integrity with themselves possibly, and B, already like to the entire universe feel different because, you shouldn't be overweight. It's not healthy. Why aren't you taking care of yourself? It appears like a moral failing when it's really not. And to highlight that in a very sensitive way takes skill. You got to know how to do that. You got to build that rapport. You got to be able to do it in a way that is, going to be received. But, honestly, like I've started conversations with a lot of people who are overweight and in this body, right? Where actually after I lost over, 130 whatever pounds, it's been well received. And only after the conversation or in the conversation do they know I lost weight. I bring it up as they look at me like a regular guy and I can see how they light up, like taxi drivers, Uber drivers, the amount of Uber drivers I recommend books to, like who are struggling with their weight or eating, fast food, working too hard and just like trying to make ends meet or whatever. It's available. You just need to get like everything else, get in the reps.
No doubt. Morty, what's the language to use? So for example, like, is fat appropriate to say? Is overweight? Is plus size? Is obese? Like, what are the words, that I guess, quote, fit people can use, to talk about this stuff in a way that's like educated and not triggering?
I'll be honest with you, man. Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
I say fat sometimes. I say overweight sometimes. Because here's the thing, right? Fat, you're labeling it. Overweight is a judgment. It's like overweight compared to what? Overweight compared to society? Actually not. You're actually within range. People who are fit are the odd ones now, right? But the way I think about it, instead of the label, it's more about the energy you're bringing to it. People can feel the energy more than the words, I believe. So if I feel your compassion and your curiosity, I couldn't care less if you said fat or overweight to me. It'd be like, all right, good. He says fat, I can see he cares. It's not even a question. It's about where's it come from?
Yeah. Awesome. Morty, Bryan and I have known so much of your story, but like this conversation, this focused, conversation has really brought out the nuance, the depth, the beauty of your life journey, and like really seeing the power of just taking the focus off of losing the weight and instead losing the shame and transmuting that to self-love. And just like all those milestones along the way have been really beautiful. So I imagine, when you have people come to work with you to go on their own journey, and as I'm saying this, Bryan is slowly removing his shirt. So I guess we're doing shirtless therapy right now.
Shirtless Fridays.
Morty, get up there. Yeah. Morty's shirt's off. I'm wearing a button down and an undershirt. So I'm just leaving this. I'm leaving this on. But if someone's like, okay, I need more of Morty, I need to pick up what he's putting down, where do you point them?
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I love talking about this stuff. So this has been an awesome conversation and I love sharing it. And that's why I created the Feeling Full podcast, which is the beginning of a brand, Feeling Full. And the whole idea is to feel full in your life because, a lot of the struggles that we're talking about come from feeling that lack, whether it's a lack of self-love, a lack of compassion for yourself, a lack of appreciating where you're at right now in the journey that you've been on. So how I started this podcast was the first 6 episodes that I recorded were all solo episodes. And for a long time, I was guiding people through a 12-month program and like from the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey. And I basically compacted a lot of those lessons in these 6 episodes. So anybody who's struggling could just listen to those 6 episodes and get what they need. The whole idea of Feeling Full is to share stories of other people who have lost weight. Because every story is going to resonate with different people. Like my story may land with you and it may not. And that's totally normal. And so on the Feeling Full podcast, what my goal is to share stories of people who have figured this out and experts, around habits and psychology and body image and self-love and all the other things. So there's a series of interviews and there's a series of solo episodes. And just follow the podcast. And as time goes on, I'll continue to, let you know what else is available and what else is out there.
Love that, man. So cool.
Morty, I love this idea, man. I love the Shirtless Thursdays or Fridays. Can we call it Shirtless Fridays now?
We call it, yeah, sure.
This is great, man. And I'm pumped to check out those first 6 episodes because summer's right around the corner. My body is not feeling like I want it to feel. And actually, Becca and I set an intention when we moved to Philadelphia to get ourselves into better shape, just to feel good in our bodies. So I'm definitely going to check this out and maybe join you for the journey.
Love that, man. Love that. Yeah. I think anybody listening who is struggling with their weight, I would just say it takes a lot of little steps. And even when you get there, like, yes, I've lost lots of weight and I have the surgery and I feel relatively good in my body. It's still like a daily thing. It doesn't go away. There's a lot of daily practices that I do every day to help me on this process, to keep me going. Yes, I struggle, but I definitely struggle a lot less today, but there still is struggle. And I don't think it ever goes away. You just get better at dealing with it. And you have more tools. And I think the more tools you can put into your tool belt, this is my hope anyways, the more tools I should talk from my experience, right? The more tools I put in my tool belt, the easier it gets and the happier I find myself and the more space. And this is my new measuring stick. Like, how do you measure your success? Is it the 130 pounds you lost? Really? The way I like to quote unquote grade myself in the past, it used to be like how much weight I lost. And now how much space between the way I am right now, like doing what I know is healthy for me and making the right choices versus like how long it's been since I actually like found myself off the rails, which used to be a daily thing. And now like, I don't remember the last time I really felt off the rails. So I think that space that you have between where you feel good and feel proud, not following a diet, not on or off a diet. The decisions that you're making are aligned with who you want to be and you feel proud of yourself versus actually like falling off like and not feeling proud and not being happy with your decisions. And this more space that you have between being proud and not being proud, that to me is a great way to measure my own success. And I feel good about that.
So one of the lessons that took me, about 230 podcast episodes to learn was that sometimes the greatest gold happens after I hit the stop button on the recording. And so instead of hitting stop today when I thought the episode was over, I let it run. And it turns out there was some gold here. And so in this bonus content, you're going to hear from Morty, a very cool and simple, powerful technique. Anytime you are feeling the urge, the craving to indulge or to binge, enjoy this bonus content. The space between my off the rail moments was like much more indicative of my well-being and my success. And also like the magnitude of that off the rail moment. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like off the rails
Exactly.
used to be like, like I could go, down a long, and then off the rails moment could be like, I had an off the rails moment last night, it was I ended up sexting an old partner and it felt like old energy. And I woke up this morning and instead of like continuing that energy, like I sat down, I did my morning pages. I wrote it all out. And by the time I was finished doing my 40 minutes of morning pages, that old fiending and, like I'm fiending for something that was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the past, I would have just like continued.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the relationship to the off the rail moment is so important, Dom. And I think that's what you're speaking about. And it's so cool actually, because when I think about off the rails, I think about like Morty deep down into like cakes and cookies and like just completely losing it. But like if we're talking about micro off the rail moments, I mean, there was a couple of weeks ago where I overate on a bag of almonds, which for me is a big deal because I don't usually overeat. I should say I don't overeat. I don't like go into something like that where I'm like, I can overeat sometimes on a meal, but it's in a healthy guideline. And when I overate like intentionally on a bag of almonds, I probably ate like 4,000 calories that were just not needed. And my body's like, oh man, like just, you've that bloated feeling. But the next morning I got up and I was just like, cool. Yeah, it's some almonds. Great. New day. Go for a walk.
I think that like this moment that you guys are both talking about, two separate areas, is a moment that we should talk about. Maybe it's even another podcast. But it's like when you feel yourself going down that spiral, how can we stop it and then move back the other direction? Because I know that exact same thing. Usually for me is with food and working out. Then I get tired and then I want to jerk off and then I feel like crap for the next day and then I have shame that night and then I wake up and being like, I'm already in the cycle. I may as well get some cookies,
I know exactly that cycle and I want to share one thing which may work. When you know you're going down that rabbit hole and it's going to happen, find a way to distract yourself. What I like to do is I put on Metallica and I have a song bookmarked on my thing and I just like, it just shouts in my ear, right? It's like my 15-year-old self just blasting. And what I tell myself, I'm like, after the Metallica song, if you want that thing, would it fill in the blank, you go have it. But first, you listen to the Metallica song. And what that does is, you're not saying, little Morty, like 10-year-old Morty, no, you can't have that chocolate. You're just saying, you can have it. It's all yours if you really want it. But first, we're putting a Metallica song on. You're going for a 5-minute, 10-minute walk.
I love that.
But you have to give yourself permission. You have to tell yourself it's okay to eat the thing after or whatever you want to do. You want to jerk off or anything that fill in the blank.
Create
right?
that space, right? Just between the stimulus and response, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
I like it.
Yeah, I think permission is the most important thing. By saying to yourself, I'm not going to willpower you through this. I'm not going to tell you can't have it because you know, but then you try to trick yourself into not wanting it.
It's funny you say that because this morning when I was journaling about this, it was like, okay, I'm going to stop sexting. I'm going to stop flirting. I'm going to stop. And I was like, okay, that's a lot of like stop signs.
Right.
It felt really restrictive. And I was like, okay, so instead, like when this urge comes up, then I'm going to go look at my plants. I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. I'm going to picture my great man and ask him what he would do. Just like enough space in between that, like that urge coming up and not squelching it, not reacting to it, but just like, here are 3 other ways that I could handle it. And that's happened a few different times today. So I've looked at my plants, I've taken the breaths.
You have your pre-recorded program of like, oh, I feel I'm going down the hole. Let me do these 3 things. And then if I'm still feeling like sexting, if I'm still feeling like eating, then I'll go ahead and do it. I like that.
I love the last part the most because I'm like, you can still have it. Like I tell myself, if I feel like I want to binge or eat something and it's like at 6 o'clock, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to binge. Okay, we're going to do the binge. Just go home first, watch a movie for an hour. And then if you still want it at 7 o'clock, you know what you got to do. You know all the things you have to do to clean it up and the integrity and you know all the shit you got to deal with. But if you want it, we're going to make it nice and we're going to do it good. I'm not going to do it out of shame. Like now, if I'm actually going to binge, I'm like, all right, we're going in. Let's go in with pride here.
This is something, Morty, that seems to work for you because it sounds like the same thing with the surgery. Like either you're going to do it out of shame or you're going to do it kind of consciously and knowingly and connectedly. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I haven't connected those dots, but one last thing I want to share here is the first thing somebody can do, and we may have said it already, but the second thing or first thing, it's like allow yourself to eat the thing that you want. So if you think like I need to go on a diet and lose weight, I encourage you to go on a diet and lose weight. That's great. I'm all about that. But first, if you're going to eat a dinner that you know isn't the healthiest for you or a lunch or a day, whatever, do it in a way where you're celebrating the entire thing. Don't sit in your car eating M&Ms out of your pocket feeling like you shouldn't be eating the M&Ms. Buy all the M&Ms you want. And then put them on a nice tray in your living room, dim the lights, put your favorite movie on, get it on speaker, maybe invite a friend over with you and hang out. And then don't only order M&Ms. Make it a nice thing. Maybe cook yourself a nice dinner. If you want pizza, cook a nice pie at pizza with all the cheese that you want. But just do it in a way where you're not hiding and not feeling bad for these choices. Dude, because
it's the same thing that like when it comes to me jerking off, it's the same thing. Cause it's like, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to jerk one out. I'm going to feel really fucking upset and guilty about it after it's over. Or I'm going to make a night of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm actually going to, I'm going to
masturbate like a king.
I'm going to masturbate. Exactly. We talked about this with Jade Bryce and Mercedes Terrell on one Awaken the King episode a couple episodes ago, where it's like would a king like disappear to the bathroom and jerk off as quietly and quickly as he could, you know, like that's a weakling, right? Versus like the king sits on his throne and is like, I'm going to jerk this thing. I'm going to feel like $1 million after it's done. So like make it an experience.
Love it.
Yes, exactly. Make it an experience. Enjoy it. Bask in the moment.
Now it is time to take action. What is the one insight, aha, takeaway, technique, or practice that you will put into effect in your life regarding this conversation with Mordechai on body shame, sustainable weight loss, and self-love? And the Facebook group is tailor-made for conversations like this. So go over there, start the convo, let the men know that what you're up to. There's plenty of other guys, like I said at the very beginning of this episode, who are there for the very same reason. This is a great opportunity for you to meet each other. So head over to the Great Man Within Facebook group. As always, it's linked in the show notes, and we'll see you in the next episode.